Back on the chassis of Brookes No.1, we've been doing the final tweaks we require before we put the boiler back on the locomotive. Here at the rear of the locomotive, we've got the brake shaft. This is obviously a vital part of the locomotive and actions the brake motion on the rest of the wheels. We had quite a problem getting this back in, even though it only came out a few months ago, because the sides of the frames had actually moved once we removed it. As a result, to get the shaft back in place, we actually had to jack the sides of the frames apart very slightly to insert it. Once this was done, the bolts could be attached on both sides and various other adjustments are done. The main brake shaft is attached to two things. On the right hand side here is the screw brake, the handbrake, for stationing the locomotive when not in steam or when not operated for a certain amount of time. On the left hand side here is a steam brake cylinder. This is a steam brake that can be actuated from the cab by the driver or other members of the crew and is used in operation of the locomotive when buffering up, manoeuvring around, shunting, etc. Once these two brakes here operate on this main shaft, the power and the force of the brakes is then relayed down the length of the locomotive along the brake pull rods. These rods are attached sideways on stretchers out to the brake blocks that obviously operate on each of the 6 driving wheels on the locomotive. So getting all the adjustments of the pins and the distances between the different hangers and rods is very, very important to make sure that the action of the brakes on each set of wheels is equal and that one set of wheels or brake blocks is not taking a large amount of force. This could lead to quite a serious problem. For example, large amounts of force on a hanger or a brake block could lead to it cracking and failing in service. So the setting up of this braking system has been quite a long process, but now it's complete and we're confident that the braking on the locomotive is all adjusted completely right. There's two things at the front of Brookes I want to have a quick look at. First of those is that the braking mechanism is now complete. The brake block and the brake hanger are attached. They've been adjusted to the mechanism which we saw earlier, running right from the back of the locomotive to the front, providing that equal braking force. The other thing which is important to the locomotive's operation but people often forget is that of adhesion. Most of the time the rails are fine for the locomotive to adhere to those purely with its own weight, but that doesn't always work in wet or autumnal weather when especially the leaves fall on the line. So what we've been working on here is the sanding mechanism for the locomotive. This sandpipe, rather mangled and not original to the locomotive at all, ran from the sandbox at the top here, this is the operating mechanism for it here, downwards towards the track, was just held in place with this circular stanchion here. We want to actually replace that with something a little bit more accurate to the real thing. So here we've been having a look at the drawings and actually the sandpipes were not straight at all like this. They prescribed a gentle curve down from the sandbox under the front wheels. These sandboxes here can be operated from the locomotive cab by the driver, and these drop sand at the front of the locomotive. There's also a set that will drop sand at the rear of the locomotive for travelling in a backwards direction. We spent quite a long time looking at the chassis of Brookes No.1, but obviously the very important beating heart of the locomotive is the boiler. So earlier in the film we saw quite a lot of work going on with the boiler, retubing it and also cleaning, painting it, etc. But most importantly, before the locomotive boiler is actually put back into the frames, is that it is tested. Now this bit of archaic looking equipment here is the hydraulic pump. So once the boiler has had all the tubes reinserted, everything's been checked and sealed, then actually it will be completely filled with water. Unlike in operation when there's a steam space at the top, what we want to do is completely hydraulically fill the locomotive and add pressure to it at twice its operating pressure. So to do this, we use this piece of equipment here, looking on the gauge, and actually identify that the locomotive has no leaks or faults in the platework or the tubes or any of the other elements which make it steam tight in operation. As well as that, once the locomotive has been hydraulically tested using this pump, the boiler inspector will want to come and see it in steam and check that there are no faults before the boiler is lowered back into the frames.